Okay, so just before we go and join with the andrology section, we're going to talk a little bit about what's going to happen in the future with regards to FNUU, and it's not the subspeciality, it's the subsection group. And we really want this to be largely audience driven, so I'm going to go through my slides really very quickly and hopefully bring up three things that I'd like to talk about. The three main topics that I think are important is probably a continuation of the discussion that was started this morning following Sophia and Nikesh's presentation on the stress urinary incontinence audit. Talk a little bit about the patient information leaflets, which have very recently been scrutinised, and also a little bit at the end about FNUU training and how we're going to recruit into the subspeciality in the future. So with regards to the audit, BAUS has an aim, which is to create an evidence base through audit and data gathering to drive quality improvement in urology. And again, in line with most of BAUS aims, they're looking to try and achieve this by 2020. We have a critical review of all BAUS audits, which is imminent. So your views today are essential. I will take those forward and represent the subsection at this audit review. So what have we got? Well, as Nikesh and Sophia showed us this morning, we've got 3 consecutive years of published data, which makes it a really very big series and useful data. Almost 3,000 procedures, about 100 consultants from 82 centres, roughly 4:1 primary recurrent surgery. The website's really good. It's patient-facing. It links to patient information leaflets, hospital data. You can drill down to individual consultants' data. And very, very shortly, we're going on to NHS choices where the surgeon volume and results from the PROMs will be available for all to see. The problem is we've got a fairly low data capture rate, so you compare it with HES figures and we're roughly capturing just over 70%, and 63% of our cases have got follow-up data included, which equates to about 45% of all of the data if HES figures are used. And as you can see, gynecologists are doing the vast majority of stress incontinence procedures. But when you look at their audit system via BSUG, the capture rate's less than 40%, as Nikesh pointed out this morning. So the problems are that it's surgeon-entered data, which has got a significant risk of bias. You know, it relies on us to enter all our data in an accurate way, and it's easy to lose the odd case. So, you know, significant bias. This is not high-level evidence. The data capture rate is slightly disappointing, but we're going to do some work to try and improve that. And there obviously are some surgeons and some units that don't enter any data, and this is quite an expensive process. So I think what I'd quite like to do now is open it up to the floor and just continue the discussion that we had this morning with regards to ways to improve the SUI audit, if any. Now, just bear in mind that I will be asking you this question at the end of our 2 or 3 minutes discussion. Would anyone like to make any points?
Would you like to make a point about the SUI audit data? But you hadn't actually entered any data before, had you? Yeah. So what were the reasons why you didn't? I'm just Harry came and talked to me, so I'm not particularly picking on him. I thought it was great that you joined in for the first time, and I just wondered what were the things that stopped you entering before, and what made you start now?
When the format of the database changed, that's when I slipped, because I got used to entering it in its original format, and then when it changed, I never really got round to working out how to do it. But now I'm up to speed with it. It takes 5 minutes to do, but I did have quite a backlog to catch up with.
And I know everyone says I have to enter this data myself, and it's a tremendous pain. But the median number of procedures done by a urologist in the UK is 9. It can't really take that long. Yeah, are there any other reasons? Guys who are entering, who are not entering, what are your reasons for doing both? Rizwan? Because you look happy. If you give the gentleman with the white hair.
No, I think probably I get the registrar to do them and we do it at the same time. I think it's a collaborative thing and it works very well.
Just while the Mac's making its way to Magda, we can be thinking about why do you think our follow-up rate is so poor? Just have a think about that.
I'd like just to comment from Richard Parkinson's comment this morning talking about consent. If we're concerned about the comeback we are expecting in England, particularly having had the Scottish experience, you're only cementing your own practice if you are entering patients onto this database. It's a bit of an insurance policy, if you like, just again as evidence that you're practicing well.
Vibash, do you enter data?
I have been late catcher-up all my life. So similarly with this also, I always tend to have a backlog, and I think the only difference between me and majority of us is I admit that I'm chaotic, whereas and we allow a backlog to develop. I think that is where the inertia sets in. So if we just kept going case by case, as you said, it hardly takes any time, provided we just go along as we are doing the cases, don't allow a backlog to. And for that to happen, I think obtaining consent months before or at the time of booking the patient, similarly entering these data, we have to manage our clinic numbers and theatre numbers, numbers on the lists more practically and more stringently.
Hi, it's Mel. I'm very fortunate in that I have someone who actually enters the data. We have a clerk who does it for all the BAUS thing. The big issue I have is actually the follow-up data. And the reason is that the patients end up in multiple different clinics, seen by different people, and it's actually very hard sometimes to keep track of that on a sort of practical level. So inputting the data is not the problem, it's actually chasing the follow-up data, which is proven to be more difficult. So I'll be happy to hear how everyone else does the follow-up data, which is what I'm struggling with.
So I have blank questionnaires in the clinics that I do. So even if I'm not there, they'll be given out when the tape patients come back. But as Tamsin says, we're not talking about enormous numbers here with a median surgeon number of 9 in the UK. So, you know, even with backlogs, they can only be so big.
Mr. Parkinson?
I think you can do it. It's better to do it as you go along, much better, and it takes just a couple of minutes, but it takes much longer having to dig out the notes and find out. I think just a slight thing that maybe we have to talk this one out is to say, what are we doing for? What are we actually going to use the data for? Because I think that's the question, isn't it? How are we going to use it moving forward? What's the point? What's the point? And we've got to come up with a what's the point.
What I'm asking.
Aaron Sahai's got his hand up as well, and then Mrs. Van, Susie Van.
I just want to say, I think it's really, really important that the consultants take ownership of this. So I know I've heard some comments about registrars and other people, but this is important data. It's your data. If you're going to get registrars there, that's fine as long as you're checking it over. But I think it needs to be consultant-led. It's a proper audit from our, national organisations. So I feel strongly that it's going to be consultant-led, consultant-driven. I'm not saying
I completely disagree with that, because I think in order to get an unbiased data entry, it has to not be inputted by us. It has to be put in by someone else. And if it's your registrar who is just going to put in what the patient says, then that's probably a less biased audit.
Well, as long as you're getting full, accurate data sets, then. I mean, I don't know.
I agree that consultants must take responsibility for the data going in. I absolutely agree with that, but I can see Tamsin's point about external validation.
Can I ask you a question, Chris? Why are urogynecologists not having to do it?
I don't know the answer to that. It was a question I was going to ask Nikesh this morning. I didn't get.
Which is bizarre.
Yeah, they
didn't.
The thing is, I entered
my data on an iPad at the time, and I would just recommend it to all of you. It's so easy. Yeah. There's networks everywhere now, and I agree. There's not much data, but there's also the urethroplasty database. There's this database. There's all sorts of things. So anything that makes life easier.
But when you look at the response rate on the BSOG database, there'll be a few nervous gynecologists in the next 2 or 3 years, weren't they, with all of the tape cases coming to court? You know, where can they demonstrate that they contribute to national audit? And, you know, the majority of us are doing that. Ian?
Hi, Chris. Yeah, it's going back to this morning, isn't it? We're going to steal a march on the BSUG database by putting in our follow-up data. You know, we do the minority of the procedures, but we have a chance to have the majority of the follow-up because of the very nature of their database.
So I would say, going back to Richard's comment, why are we doing this? We're doing this to show, at the moment we've only got 3 months follow-up, and I think we need to change what we're doing to extend so that we have year follow-up, 5-year follow-up, 10-year follow-up, and then we would actually have very useful data, but it's just set up by BAUS at the moment for 3 months data. So we have been exploring our own databases to keep our own long-term results as a group with Richard.
I think that from the NHS England mesh review, that was the thing that was really lacking in the literature, and we couldn't find it when we went and looked, which was long-term data, and we're building up a cohort that we can actually at some point collect long-term data on if necessary. So I think we'll
Roland's at the back, and I feel like I've ignored him long enough.
You have, quite right.
Very far
away.
I mean,
Chris has basically said what I was
Thank you, Roland. Next.
Chris has said what I was going to say, but the NHS England review, which comes out in a month's time, will actually say that we want long-term follow-up. So what we've got to do is push NHS England to actually pay for that.
Okay, so why don't we take out our mobile phones, and apparently if I press the green button you can vote on this now. So the question is, what should we do with the SUI audit? Should we continue in its current format? Should we push as a group for a registry which could be industry funded? Should we keep our own individual data and save BAUS some money, or other? And if you vote other, you'll be asked to expand on that. So vote now. Oh, where's the music? I had music on it.
The availability of scan.
Okay, so we're split between continuing as we are and asking for a registry. So, oh, hang on. No, we're so I shall take these data to the audit review that BAUS are going to comment.
Can we tell how many people have voted?
We can get, yeah, so there you go. 8, so there's going to be about 20 maybe.
Oh, come on, there's more than 20 people in here. Vote. So not only can Mr. Foley can't read patient information leaflets accurately, and he can't get the app downloaded.
So, in the interest of moving on, if you've got any strong views that you want me to take forward on your behalf, then I'm more than happy to do so. So the next thing is the patient information leaflets that perhaps people will have some views on. We significantly overhauled this last year and the early part of this year, and specific thanks to Mary Garthwaite and Richard Parkinson and Sheila and Sophia Cashman and everyone who was really involved on the committee. We consulted the Plain English campaign and the Patient Information Forum, and we've now got patient information leaflets for about 40 different procedures. We believe that patients should be receiving consistent information, so no matter whether they're coming to my clinic in Newcastle or Tamsin's in London, they should be getting consistent information, and that's one of the things that the whole mesh review has brought out, the consistency of patient counselling. So I'm just going to take you through something that we probably all do, which is intrathecal botulinum toxin injections. And as you can see, most of the guidelines summarise key points at the start. So there's a box there looking at, what Botox is for, where you'll have it done, what the possible side effects can be, and the need for repeat procedures are commented on. And these are the subheadings, and that's common throughout all of the BAUS PILs in terms of specific questions patients may ask, and it's covered really well, and I think the Botox one's a particularly good one. And then they quantify the side effects with these traffic light stroke battery systems, which we didn't all agree with, but we went with on advice. So looking at the side effects of Botox, you can see them. One of the most common is that your symptoms will return, a bit of mild stinging or burning, bleeding, all the way through to rare things such as generalized weakness or an allergic reaction. And you know, this is good visual and verbal information with regards to the procedure that the patient can expect to undertake. So the discussion is that, you know, are we as a subsection going to recommend that these patient information leaflets are adopted by all of us in our clinics and used as the primary source of information with a specific aim of ensuring consistency of information delivered to our patients? And you will be voting on this in a second. Get your apps ready. Anyone like to make any points regarding the patient information leaflets? Mary?
People should be aware that it will say on the site that you don't. One option is that you don't actually use the BAUS form. You can take bits out of it, and as a member through the login area, you have access to information leaflets in Word format, so that you can copy sections of it into your own local information leaflets. But you are asked if you would kindly at least recognise that it is from BAUS and the BAUS website, the BAUS information leaflet.
Nikesh?
Thanks. It's just another body of work I was thinking about from this morning's discussions with Richard and medical legal. Clearly, the medical legal experts can't agree and quite obviously generate income for themselves from that. But can you get a medical legal sign-off so all the medical legal bodies get together and say, well, actually, this is what the risks are for this procedure. So for suprapubic catheter, you put in death or you don't put in death. And that's the agreement that you don't then come back to later in a court.
But lawyers, the law, our courts of law can't agree, because that's why they keep going to the Court of Appeal and things get changed. So having one lawyer say this is fine doesn't mean that someone else will think it's fine.
So I'd agree that you wouldn't have one lawyer. You'd get all the guys that do medical legal work in the UK for urology, and they go through them and they sign it off.
Ian, what do you think with your college hat on? Microphone's coming.
The consent forms, I think, are fine. I think they're beautiful, actually. They're an upgrade on the last lot, which were good, and these are very good. But the problem is simply because you've given it to the patient, it's not proof of consent in terms of Montgomery. It doesn't actually prove that the patient's understood what's in it, and that's the challenge. So simply getting a list of acceptable side effects will not solve the problem.
This is meant to sort of augment your interaction, and so the consent starts off. So you see the patient in clinic, you give them the information leaflets, you either sign the consent form and reconfirm on the telephone or at another clinic. I think in Glasgow you've got a consent clinic, haven't you? If you, the gentleman with the beard, if you take him which is like half the room, sorry. I think it's just designed to augment and say that we all consistently give the same patient information. I think that's quite a nice idea.
I mean, we're obliged to use this if the patient's having a tape. There is a Scottish NHS tape thing that we have to use as well. But there's no reason you can't also use the BAUS information leaflets, and I do use them, and I think the new ones are really good. But I'm entirely in agreement with Ian. Just simply giving patients information leaflets is not proof of consent, and I put up the sort of shared information table concept this morning, which Will Lager and Ayr has been very keen on. I think that's a really good way of doing it. You get the patient to write in the boxes why they're having one operation, why they don't want another operation, get them to sign it, and that's proper consent, and I think that'll stand up pretty well in court.
Roland, I won't ignore you. Go on.
Thank you very much, Chris. I mean, just following on what Mike has said, from a medico-legal point of view, the information sheets are very important, and the lawyers will support us because it is a national body that has brought these up. But you have to prove in your notes that you have done proper informed consent. And that relies on you ensuring that the patients have asked the appropriate questions and that they have understood. And providing you have done that, your lawyers will support you.
Okay, so we're going to take it to a vote now. How many of us are willing to use the BAUS patient information leaflets as they are in the overhauled versions as their main source of clinic information? All vote now.
So we do have comparative patient information leaflets on stress incontinence and overactivity on the website, but we don't have that homework sheet that your colleague puts in. I mean, that's something we could consider.
Definitely. Okay, so I know I'm overrunning, so we'll move on quite quickly now. So training and recruitment, we are competing with the robots, although I'm sure functional reconstructive urology will move into the robotic era fairly soon. In the subsection, we've created a training and education executive. There are 4 of us that sit on it, and we've also compiled a list of the courses, the training events, and they're all on the website. We're taking FNU around the region, so we had the Cambridge meeting last year. Tamsin's incorporating this year's meeting with a masterclass, and then I'm going to do something in Newcastle next year. So there's no vote for this one, but just for the last 2 minutes of the session, can we just think about, firstly, how can we attract high caliber medical students and FYs into FNUU, or how we can attract